Video has become fully democratized for businesses, for marketers, for individuals. And it's completely flipped on its head where 10 years ago we were making, one or two or three videos in a given year. Nowadays we're making one or two videos a day.
This is On Camera, On Brand, a show for professionals who want to look good on camera, but don't have the time or expertise to turn their office into a Hollywood studio. In each episode, Rob Rusher uncovers how professionals can get the most from their home or office setups. If you invest the time to share your stories on camera, you should be on brand.
Welcome back to another episode of On Camera, On Brand. I'm your host, Rob Rusher, and in this episode, I sit down with the VP of Marketing at Vidyard, Tyler Lessard. Before we started recording, I told Tyler my goal was to put out actionable advice for B2B marketers using video to drive revenue. Well, he delivered on that and then some. If you're a professional using video to build an audience and convert leads, this episode is for you. Let's jump in. I've listened to a couple. You've been on a lot of podcasts, it seems like. I've heard you've been popped up, and I think was it like the B2B growth show? You had like a series with them, right?
Yeah, I recently did that. James asked me to co-host a micro series on building a media brand as part of a B2B company. So that was certainly very interesting. But I do pretty frequently speak on podcasts about all things.
Yeah, all video things. Yeah,
all things. Usually video, general marketing, content marketing, future of content marketing, because video is obviously a core part of that. So, yeah.
Definitely. Okay, well, why don't we just, I'll see, I always stumble because it's always like, how do you go from a pre-recorded intro to natural? But I guess I can just start with the first question and something just to almost paint the picture. So you came to Vidyard about 9 years ago, 2012. In general, what was the video market like in, your clients and customers? What was Vidyard doing in 2012, and what did you see as trends that were, back then?
Well, I mean, boy, oh boy, have things changed in the last 10 years. In case people hadn't noticed, not just the rise of AI and that whole pandemic thing, but when you look at video in particular, it's been an incredible growth over the last decade. And when I joined Vidyard back in 2012, the world, like you said, was very different. And in B2B marketing, video was a very, how shall I put it, coveted content format. Right? It was used sparingly. It was expensive to produce. It was always involved an agency, and was something that you would do maybe 2 or 3 times in a given year, where you would use a video for brand campaigns, where you might use it for one big program. And even at that time, social video wasn't really a thing, if you can imagine that. Fast forward to today, and video has become fully democratized for businesses, for marketers, for individuals. And it's completely flipped on its head where 10 years ago we were making, one or two or three videos in a given year. Nowadays we're making one or two videos a day, some of us, where it's now become this format that's hyper accessible for us as creators. It's completely inexpensive. In many cases, we can create content on the devices we have around us. But also, what's really, really important, Rob, is that it's not just become more accessible and approachable for us as creators, the supply side, if you will, but the demand side has also completely changed, right? Audiences today are not only expecting, but also like anticipating and often preferring multimedia content as the way to learn with businesses or about businesses. And so the demand for video content keeps going up. The ability for us to provide that video content continues to accelerate. But then we also layer in all these new formats of short form vertical videos on different social channels, changing sort of expectations of audiences. So a lot has happened, and how we need to think about it as marketers, as businesses, as creators has absolutely changed fundamentally.
Yeah, and I can remember too, my background is in the commercial and the, 100 grand spots and 20 people crew. And it is interesting thinking back, because you're right. Companies would drop 100 grand for one video, and there was no cut this up into 3 pieces. I mean, even I remember in the beginning, even having like stills separately was a rare occurrence, right? Where it now seems, get as much as you can from one piece and consistently put it out there. So how did you even find out about Vidyard then? Because that must have been pretty new 10 years ago, right? And it was
Yeah.
definitely, I would say, at the forefront of what was to come video wise, video messaging especially.
It was really interesting. At the time, admittedly did not have any background in video specifically. I was a marketing guy in the world of tech. And I got introduced to the co-founders at Vidyard at the time through some mutual connections. And in speaking with them, it was really interesting to hear how they were building a video platform, a video hosting and analytics platform at the time, specifically geared towards B2B businesses. And what was immediately interesting was actually the fact that I had to stop and pause and say, yeah, what's going to happen there? And why isn't anybody else solving that problem yet? Which there really wasn't. And that's often the sign of like a good, exciting business, right? When it actually forces you to pause and ask questions like that. And as I dug into it, first of all, as a marketer, very clearly understood the value of video as a content medium and had no doubt, along with my colleagues, that, the use of video was only going to increase. But what I also quickly realized in working with the team was that the needs of B2B businesses was very different from consumer businesses and, other types of markets. Because in the B2B world, as I was familiar with, it is a lot more about how you use content to connect with audiences, to educate them, to build an ongoing relationship, to support the sales process, as opposed to just building awareness. And traditionally, B2B content teams are largely using written content, blog posts, PDFs, guides, ebooks, and so on as a means to do that, right? To bring audiences in, to educate them on topics, to help create demand for their solutions, and to even support the sales process. And again, I think, much like the founders at that time, it was very clear that within a matter of, it wasn't if, but when, right? It would happen that video would start to become a prominent content medium within. But as you think about that as a B2B marketer and you go, uh-oh, if we start making videos instead of ebooks, what happens to our lead gen programs? Because our lead gen programs are built around this idea of, I can like put a gate in front of an ebook and I can track who downloads it. And then we get their email address and then we can nurture them and do these things. Whereas video is a bit of a different. And so the team here was smart enough to build a platform where not only did it make it easy to distribute video content, to brand it, to make it a core part of your business, but to also track the analytics behind it, to know who was watching, how long they were engaging, and to make sure that data could feed back into your marketing automation and sales solutions. And so it had this very interesting appeal to say, hey, not only can we help you unlock the power of video, but we can integrate it with how you go to market and make sure it's a powerful marketing and sales tool, not just a new way to communicate your value propositions. So that was really the first, 5 years in my life at Vidyard was focused on that market and really helping B2B companies, start to unlock that potential of video in meaningful ways.
And because thinking back then, I mean, DSLRs, obviously, because when I came into the industry, it was like, if you didn't spend $100,000 on a camera, there's not really much else other than what you could find at Best Buy. And then 2010, I think DSLRs came out. So everyone could have a professional camera. In the beginning, how were your clients using Vidyard, if you can remember? Was there whether B2B or just in general, I'm just kind of curious how people are using that then.
What's really interesting is, two big things have happened in terms of how they've been creating the content and the types of content they've been creating over the last decade. And if you think back again, going back, say, 10 years, it started very much of how I would think about it as top of funnel for all of us marketers out there. So video was very much a top of funnel centric medium. It was used for like big advertisements and or like big sort of brand campaigns, things that were meant to create awareness, if you will. So it started at the top of the funnel. And it also started with the majority of that content being produced by outsourced agencies, by video production agencies, by brand agencies, and so on. Which brings us back to that, we'd make 2-3 videos a year, high budget with an agency, awareness-based. And they would leverage Vidyard to make sure that they could maximize the value in those investments, right? They were spending a lot of money on this content. They wanted to make sure they could track who was watching that content. They could use it in their marketing and sales programs and show some ROI. But as the years went on, two things happened. Number one was that video became more and more accessible and more video content was being created in-house. So in some cases, our clients, they would have folks either in their content teams, in their social media teams, in their brand teams who were savvy in video and were able to start creating content internally. And or they started hiring internal producers as part of their marketing teams. Much like traditionally we've hired designers and writers, now we were hiring producers because that opportunity and that expectation of video content was increasing. At the same time, the use of video in that funnel kept moving down. So it started for awareness, but then over the years, we saw this surge in the creation of video content for educating audiences to support the consideration phase, if you will. And this is where it started to move from explainers right into like actual like demos, but also thought leadership content, right? Interview-based content, things that normally were blogs traditionally now done in video format, right through into enablement content for sales teams and content actually for onboarding new customers and so on. So these sort of things happened in parallel where video became more inexpensive to create internally. And that kept pushing it further and further down the funnel. Because what was also interesting, and you realize it's obvious in hindsight, but you start to think about, yeah, you know what? Those videos that I create to educate my audience, my customers, my prospects, whatever it happens to be, to show them what it is that we do, to talk about as real experts how something can help. That content doesn't need to have drone footage, right? It doesn't need to, be shot with actors. In fact, the opposite, right? It should be made with your own internal people, with your advocates, with your influencers. It should be shot in a way that feels very genuine and authentic and not overly scripted. So all these opportunities unlock themselves, and that's where I see the majority of video content now being created by our clients are those things that are fast, simple, done internally with real people, helping others understand complex ideas. And that's it. And that's the most important role it's playing now.
Yeah, there's two trends I've seen. I'll wait to circle back on the other one because I want to tie something else in. But just someone that, since the day I graduated college, I was working on video production, with commercial agencies and brand agencies. And what I've seen as one trend is that whatever the platform was, whether it's a social platform or popular websites, as soon as video got on that platform, that instantly became the most clickable, the most engaged with, and LinkedIn, I think anyone that's recently come back to LinkedIn or been on LinkedIn for years, I think you're seeing that now.
Yeah.
So for you, was there a point in time where you're like, wow, this is like the power of video, more or less? Was there a moment, or maybe you had some clients where you guys were like, wow, we're really onto something and this is working?
Yeah. Every year has always felt like that. It's funny, right? Like every year it's like, oh, this is the year of video. And then again, oh, this is the year of video. And it just keeps accelerating. It's interesting. There have certainly been a couple of tipping points, if you will. I'd say, going back to, probably somewhere around, I don't know if it was 2017, 2018, somewhere around there where we started to see video equipment really start to come down in costs. And it probably was accelerated by the smartphone market and iPhones, Android phones, this sort of mass adoption of video equipment. So that was one big milestone. Another, as you alluded to, was social media networks really embracing video. And that changed not only the video kind of content we were creating, but also our expectation as buyers and as just business professionals in general. And so our audiences now started to, again, expect and engage with video content on social media networks. I mean, it's crazy to think, going back a decade, like when I started at Vidyard, really none of the social media networks. It was just YouTube. Otherwise, Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, and there was no Tick Tock, right? Like none of them even supported video content. And now you're right. They consistently prefer it. Instagram is now Reels, really, at the end of the day, and is video first. TikTok continues to be the fastest growing social media platform and is video only. And LinkedIn, to your point, also. So the embracing of video content by the social media networks changed both sides of the demand and supply equation. And then the last one was a time that we would all love to forget, which was March of 2020, 3 years as of the recording of this episode ago, when the, of course, pandemic hit. And what happened with that was really interesting through the video lens. What happened was it pushed pretty much, the majority of business professionals to start to get comfortable being on camera themselves, right? Because now all of a sudden we shifted to, Zoom and Teams and WebEx and, virtual meetings and video conferencing and video calls. And it almost became a forcing function for us to all go, oh yeah, I'm going to turn on that camera on my laptop, or I'm going to get a webcam and I'm going to figure out how to make sure my audio doesn't suck. And I'm going to figure out the basics of lighting. And all of a sudden, whether you want to admit it or not, pretty much all of us in business became immediate video, almost creators, right? Like, sure, we weren't necessarily editing and doing these things, but we're now on camera and we're doing these. So that was a sort of really important final sort of milestone in democratizing video and making it something we all felt we could be a part of in some way. And that for us at Vidyard actually was sort of a big milestone where we saw this surge, not only in the use of produced video content for marketing, but recorded video messages, which is a tool that we provide as well, where anybody can record a quick video using their webcam, send it off to somebody via email as a video message. And we saw that really skyrocket in sales teams and even for internal use. So all of these things have sort of piled on each other to, go back to a word I used earlier, to really democratize video and also change the expectation of us as consumers of it to say, hey, I don't mind if this content has, somebody's home in their background or a dog barking, right? Like these sorts of things actually add some level of authenticity, which has actually been beneficial in many ways.
Yeah, I don't think this is an industry term, but my friends and I refer to it as the Tick Tock effect. And what I mean by that is how punchy it is. And if you, just as someone that likes to study films and shows, it's very interesting. There was a popular show, I don't know if you ever watched, Girls on HBO, Lena Dunham, and it was a great show. But if you watch the pacing, it's very slow and the things pan out and they build to the joke. And then recently there was what was it? The Lives of College Girls or something like that. It was like, it's funny because you look at those side by side, very similar, girls going through different things at that age. But the newer show was so snappy. It's almost like sometimes you would have to pause to hear the jokes, to let it sink in. And I just feel like even with content now, like you mentioned, like YouTube, I've noticed shorts are way more popular than YouTube videos. And you can almost use those shorts to build your longer form too. So that's kind of interesting, but I feel like in a way, even if you're not consciously thinking of that like I would or studying it, it is happening. And if you notice what you watch, I mean, even I love podcasts, but if I've never listened to someone's podcast, I'm not really going to click on a 45-minute, hour and a half episode at first. It's almost like you have to build that trust.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's been interesting to see how those platforms and TikTok has been the most influential in it for sure, have changed both the mindset of how we create content in many ways, but then again, also the expectations and preferences of audiences. It really came to light for me when I started to realize that some of our best performing content on LinkedIn was actually repurposed TikTok videos. And I started to coin like LinkedIn is the place where adults watch TikToks. Because you would sort of see this, like, there was almost like this like buzz when, people would they'd see a TikTok video on LinkedIn and they'd be like, oh my God, I'm going to watch that, right? Because again, it's a lot of these business professionals who don't spend a lot of time, frankly, on TikTok. But it's not because they don't like the content. It's because they don't want to get sucked into that whole rabbit hole that is TikTok. But they love the form, right? Because they just have this expectation of, oh, I get that format. It's going to be fast. It's going to hyper respect time. It's probably going to be a quick learn or a quick laugh or a little bit of both. And so you have this higher expectation of value per second going into it, if you will. And that's really, really interesting. And that's actually really influenced our own content creation over the last few years as we've seen this play out. I was the worst for it. My team, it's so funny. My team, they're very polite about it, but they're like, okay, Tyler, try saying that again, except skip the first 20 seconds. Just get into it. There's no time for, hey, this video is going to be about, they're like, no, that's what the title's for. And the on-screen text, just get into it and get it out. And it's been amazing. It's actually really transformed the way we think about content. And I think everybody's got to really study that. To your point, whether you're doing it for TikTok or those channels, or just to start to really pursue the art of short form video content as a part of your marketing and sales strategy, because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, well, you learn that lesson from adults. I learned that the not be too wordy from my 8 and 6-year-old. And I learned it from watching them on YouTube
Yeah.
because even if it was a video that we thought was cool, it's like they are skipping that thing within, I mean, you have a minute to grab these kids' attention, if that, and then they're going on to the next thing. And one thing I found curious, and I'll circle back from that, the trend, the second trend I've noticed with video, and curious if you've seen this, is you're right. At first, just video alone is great. It's different. You just feel like you can engage more. I feel like personally, I just soak up more of the knowledge.
Right.
But then I've also seen a trend, and I'm starting to see it with LinkedIn too, is like if you have a good technical quality, you can kind of surpass the other people around you. And I've even
Absolutely.
noticed it in myself when I've gone to conferences and, even software demos I'm trying to learn, where there's been a few times I've like popped up and they're like, what's going on? How did you do that? How do you look so good? And it's like, okay, there's definitely something to this,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you've seen that with like success of your clients that when they start investing in equipment or they up their game in general, if that's proven, better results or anything.
Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I no question in terms of the, how it is that you can really stand out. And there's a number of things that you do want to be mindful of as whether it's social video content, whether it's video content for your website, thought leadership, or so on. I think that having really strong personalities in your content is actually really, really important. And it's something that I think a lot of marketers underestimate today. And they, again, from traditional marketing, we never really thought about, right? Because it was like we were sort of these faceless brands, right? And everything we put out was like the veil of the brand. And it was written, static content, typically, even imagery, and even videos was often like actors or external people. And so we never really thought about, hey, who are going to be the people in this content? And that matters a lot more now than it ever has. And so I bet even in your case, like as you're in videos, there's an element of that, right? People like start to recognize you as this personality and they're like, oh, I know this person, right? And people do like to follow and associate themselves with individuals more so than brands. So there's actually a lot of power in unlocking that with video. To your point, so one way you can stand out and really kind of rise above is developing these personalities that people start to get to know. And again, just by nature of that, you'll stand out. The second is that level of quality. And, and it comes in a few different forms. There's the video quality and having that, it's almost that crispness, which I'm almost embarrassed right now. I'm using my embedded, camera in my MacBook. Normally I'm at my studio at home where I've got, the DSLR camera set up as my webcam. And I'm like, I feel like I'm popping and I love it. But I can see you as we're recording this, like you've got that crispness to you that comes from having, still professional gear that is able to help you pop from the background. That's a big part of it, right? It's that good quality equipment almost brings that 3D effect. It helps the individuals, the talent on camera really separate from the backgrounds. Whereas most webcams, even smartphone cameras, they wash them together and give a very sort of two-dimensional feel. And so we see that, we notice that even on, again, videos on social networks, you'll be like, well, that person's really popping. And it's almost literal, right? They're almost like popping up because they feel more 3D than the norm. So I think developing strong personalities, having that sense for still making sure you're developing crisp, really sort of, video that does pop are really, really important things. And then the last one that I get really, really fired up about is again, it's sort of this approach to the content of having this layer of authenticity, of transparency in it. And this is starting to apply to all forms of video content, not just social video content, right through into if you're making videos as product demos, you're doing explainer videos on your website, you're doing thought leadership content, you're doing interviews. The more you can have them feel, and hopefully be, but at least feel authentic, relatable to your audience, real people, right? Not scripted, even if it is, right? Making it feel like it's not. Those sorts of things become more and more important as well. And it doesn't take away the need to plan. It's one thing that people make the mistake of. They're like, oh, authenticity rules. So I'm not going to plan. I'm just going to hop on and talk. And you're like, no. That's the wrong way to think about it, right? Actually, you can be more authentic when you're more prepared. It's almost ironic. And so I think these are some of the like really interesting trends that are making things pop for people today. Don't step away from the need for quality. Really lean into that to differentiate, develop these personalities. Authenticity and transparency are your friends. Video allows that to come to life and really lean into those.
Yeah, it's almost like what I'm getting from what you're saying there is focus on the actual content first, and once you're getting that, then you can up it. I mean, I always treat this kind of stuff, content in general, in layers. It's like figure out what's the most important part. Which for some people, it's like just start creating, and then you'll know what you want to get or what you're lacking. And even like you said, you know you don't have the camera you usually use, but you do have a great mic. I mean, you sound good, and for the podcast, that's the most important thing for this. Everything else is like a bonus that can add to it. But having that at least is, I feel like, the most important part. Along with that, I love all those tips, because one of my things I was going to ask is tips on the video content. So that's great. On the opposite end, do you see common mistakes that, if you could bring all the clients that make these same mistakes, or you could just like nudge them in a direction, are there any of those like common mistakes you see?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's a myriad, a myriad of mistakes I see people, and we make ourselves all the time
Oh
here
yeah,
as well.
definitely.
When it comes to, I'll break it down into a couple of things. One is the content itself. And, you touched on a very important one, which is, length, pacing, kind of momentum, all really matter in video because it is a linear medium, right? It is the one drawback, as much as I'm a massive advocate of video for many, many reasons. One of the drawbacks is it is not an inherently skimmable medium, right? And so if you don't have that right kind of pacing, if you're not setting the expectation that this is going to be fast and respect your time, then video can fall flat. And so you have to be hypersensitive to that and get good at, building momentum, pacing things really, really well, getting good at editing, which again, you're either going to do internally or you're going to work with a great partner, because editing is so, so important in the world of video. And having folks who can understand how to take a longer form piece and then go, okay, I need to like tighten this into just chef's kiss, So I think that's a mistake you see a lot of people make is not respecting those sort of fundamentals of the content itself. One of the other things for content is kind of boxing themselves into a traditional mentality of what video is for, right? So again, I still, think a lot of people feel like, oh, video is for ads and this thing. And, I often find myself telling those people, okay, just like pause, bring a beginner's mind to this and recognize that video is just a different way to communicate your key messages, right? What are those messages you're delivering, right? In emails and blogs and all these different places. Could video help bring that message to life in a new way? Right? Could you leverage the visual nature of video, its ability to better educate, to create emotional, all these kinds of things to bring that message to life? And then you start to think about, oh yeah, like all these different ways in our marketing and sales process where videos could tell a better story than written content could. And so I think that's mistake number 2 is having a boxed in sort of mindset of where does video really play? Because realistically, it's a communication medium like the written word. And once you think about it that way, you start to have a bit of a different mindset. And then the last one I just wanted to note is it often, again, in the business world, this is something I'm very proud that we've done at Vidyard, but it's often becomes disconnected from the rest of the marketing, from the rest of the business in many ways. Video often sort of gets left into this silo. The creation of it is left to these like magicians in the back room that nobody else knows what's going on. They're like, ooh, the video people are up to something. And then, it's not thought about as part of your day-to-day marketing activities, right? Like even the content teams in a lot of businesses aren't thinking about like, oh, should this be a video, right? They're just assuming, oh, everything we do should be a blog or an ebook, right? It campaigns, all this kind of stuff. And so again, I think making sure that it just becomes a part of the culture of your marketing and sales teams, that you're intentionally thinking about, should this thing come to life through video in any way? Does video have a role to play in how we could deliver this message? And sometimes it won't, right? Or sometimes it'll be like, you know what, it just doesn't seem like the right fit, or it is going to be a little bit too heavy. That's fine. But be conscious about that. Make sure your team embraces it. And it just becomes a part of the way that you start to do business going forward. Otherwise, you're going to be left behind.
Yeah, and those last 2 points you made, it's interesting because I'm almost at the opposite, where I think everything should be a video,
Right.
just because that's my skill set. And to be honest, I would rather push out a bunch of videos than write a blog or
Yeah.
write text in an email. And I think that's a great way to transition, because for the longest time, and maybe that's just how the industry was, is all I focused on was like how good the video was, put it out there, and magic will happen. Money's going to fall from the skies because I put
Right.
all these videos. And the thing I love so much about Vidyard, and I've been able to play with it some more and use it, which we can get on later because that's been a lot of fun, is it seems in my view, it's almost like you guys had the distribution, so to speak, mindset first. It's like I love, for me, my favorite feature is that I can do a video to outreach in an email, and then right there on the video, you could click and go to my calendar app and schedule a meet, or
Right.
whatever it is I want to do. Maybe I'm going to produce a series and say, hey, click here to sign up for the newsletter. Was that something that's always been there, or was that something you guys kind of built at the end? And I guess specifically like
Yeah.
the call to action. And I just love how you can tell me to go click a thing, but
Yeah.
it's so much different to see it and then get like that thumbnail right on the video to just click and continue that process seamlessly.
Yeah. Well, it's been interesting because our origin is as a full stack video hosting, analytics, publishing platform for B2B businesses, marketing teams in particular. And so as part of that, we originally built to say, the video player needs to be able to be branded for the business, right? It should have their colors and all of those sorts of things, like these basic fundamentals of how you'd think about tools for marketers. It needs to be brandable. It needs to be trackable. We need to be able to track who's watching, how long, get that data back into their systems. We need the ability to have interactive calls to actions or clickable items to drive the conversions marketers are looking for, right? And you start to think about those, right? Those are the things marketers think about: the brand, the tracking, the conversions. And so we kind of grew up with that as the DNA of our video player and our backend video hosting platform. And that was really, again, the cornerstone of our first 5 to 7 years in business. And then at one point, when the capabilities were there, particularly within Chrome browsers, we launched a tool on top of it to make it really easy for people to record videos using their webcam or smartphone if you have the mobile app, screen share, and so on, or upload videos and then be able to easily add them into emails and send them off. And then we saw an opportunity as that for particularly as a sales tool to say, hey, salespeople can record a video, send it via an email to a prospect as a much better way to introduce themselves than your typical prospecting email. And then, that sort of just snowballed from there. But what happened was we had all of these great tools built for marketers that we said, hey, a lot of these same things salespeople want, right? A salesperson wants to know, I made a video for Rob and I sent it over via email. I want to know, did Rob watch it? How long did he stay engaged in it? Did he watch for 10 seconds or all the way through for a minute and a half? And then I also want the ability to convert Rob. And so again, at the end of the video, can I pop up my calendar for him to book a meeting with me, or have a button pop up that says, click here to learn more about this? And so those were all things that sort of came from the world of marketing into this more one-to-one video tool. And it's been really successful. And we're seeing what's really fun now is that, again, anybody who wants to use them, and there's free versions for all of you listening, you can go check it out yourself. And you're like, oh, cool, I can record, send, track videos and give people an opportunity to convert. And it's really, really simple, right? Like, what a world we're living in now where all of that is just something that anybody can do.
Yeah, and so easy too. And even to touch on the email part, one thing, because I did get one of those emails, from you guys when I signed up and was testing it out. And it again, it's like a hard thing to explain. And I don't know if you have like tests that go from one to the other, but when you get an email, even if the text is great and the copy's engaging and you give me a link to click, I'm sure I'll click it. But it's to have an image that you click. There's just something about visual, because email is so black and white and boring. So to have so I think that's cool. I'm curious, do you have any favorite features of Vidyard, or like things that you think are super cool or unique? Or, because I nerd out on it. I think all those things are so unique as a content, background, not really thinking too much of the marketing and distribution. And then to be able to jump in and be like, oh, I never thought about this, but cool, you guys did it all for me. And I don't have to like learn this whole new skill, to utilize it.
Yeah, like as an individual user, you sign up for Vidyard and you try it out, you record a video for somebody. One of the things that I think is really great, which is it's really simple, but it's so effective, is you can, once your video is recorded, one click, you can select, do you want a static thumbnail? You can pick the scene from the video, or you can make an animated GIF thumbnail, which you can make as a, 3 to 5 second loop of either the start of your video, or you can pick any point within your video. And it's a really simple thing, but to your point, when somebody clicks on an email, they open it up and they see not only this image, but this like animated image of maybe you waving, right? Or you're like holding up a little whiteboard with their name written on it. So they know this video was intended for them. Or maybe you did a screen recording video where you're like showing something on your screen and maybe, and there's this motion to it and they can see it. It really does change the reaction that people. And even that little small thing of having that animated thumbnail in the email body, it gives people that immediate sense of like, oh, this is like a real person. Like number one, right? Like it doesn't feel like this was just auto-generated, spam message. Number two, I can start to like almost like feel them. Even that little slight motion, right, of you like waving or pointing at something on the screen, you have this immediate sort of sense of like this real person. This sort of empathy kicks in. And again, the click-through rates on them and engagement rates, if you're using it for things like prospecting or reaching out to people, become much, much higher. Consistently people report that. And so that's really great. And then the other small piece, which is something, again, we've always done, is it's nice to know when somebody watches your video and how long they actually watched. And so when I get that notification, like Rob watched your video, and again, on the free version, it'll just tell you like, hey, someone watched your video. But on the paid versions, it'll tell me Rob watched your video and he watched it 88% of the way through or 10% of the way through. And those little notifications, you get that little rush of adrenaline. You're like, oh, Rob watched my video, right? And you're like, oh, how long did he watch? And you're like, oh, yes, he watched the whole thing. And it's almost like a little bit fun. But those sorts of insights, again, depending on how you're using it, can be really, really helpful. So simple things, but they make all the difference.
Yeah. And as a consumer, it's almost like you're adding an entertainment value, to that email or to that outreach, especially for the outreach. And I know for myself personally, to help get guests on the podcast and some of the people, I sent a video message, and it's like everyone clicks it. I mean, I don't think I'm at 100%, but it is amazing how many people respond to a video that you would think like, oh, I'm just going to throw this out there to this person and maybe they'll get back to me. And then they do, and they usually make a comment. I'm like, oh, that was cool. Or how'd you do that? And that's pretty fun. So what would you say? I know you guys probably have YouTube and all and on your website, but what's the best way, would you say, for someone to kind of learn or get started with Vidyard or just, video messaging and emails in general?
Yeah, first of all, for sure, on our website, on vidyard.com, we invest a lot in educational content for people. And even just, you can, sign up for free, you can start using it. And even just part of the product, walks you through and gives you lots of tips. There's a learning center. And then we also actually have a whole library of video templates, which are really designed for people using it for a sales use case. So if you're like in sales or you're thinking about that, there's all sorts of templates, sample scripts, things like that to help you learn as you go. We also have a video selling masterclass, again, geared towards people who want to use it for sales. But we also have a huge amount of resources on video marketing on our website, how to, use the latest and greatest strategies for videos marketing programs. So really that is, a great place to start. You'll find lots in our resources area. I'm sure you can pretty easily sift through to it. And to your point, our Vidyard YouTube channel has lots of educational content as well. So feel free to check it out, but also don't be shy to connect with me, Tyler Lessard at Vidyard on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat with people. Drop me a message or a note, and happy to help if I can.
Yeah, so vidyard.com for learning about that. You're on LinkedIn mostly if someone wants to connect or see what you've been up to, LinkedIn. Was there anything you wanted to mention that we didn't? I feel like I can't believe it's already 40 minutes, but I mean, I learned a lot. I've been taking a lot of notes. I've been trying to keep my eye contact with you, but you're giving me too many good things to try out here.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was great. I'm glad we were able to, talk about a few different areas. And I think, again, for listeners, just, my final words of advice, something I mentioned earlier is, just step back and think about the fact that, hey, video is this, content format that we all know works for many reasons. And it's more educational, it's more engaging, it's more emotional, it's more empathetic. Those are the 4 E's of video that I think about. And I just want you to step back and think, where and how could videos elevate my messages? How could it help my audience better learn about what it is that we do or things that they need to learn about? How can it help us create better connections with prospects, our customers, our peers, whatever it happens to be? And just start to go, right? Like figure it out, don't overthink it, and just start to make it a part of the culture of how you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I would say on that, I would just call that a wrap. And Tyler, thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, I got a lot, so I hope thank you for all those who are listening. I hope you got out a lot of it too. And we'll see you all on the next episode.
Thanks for checking out On Camera, On Brand. This episode is produced by Motion, a podcast agency that helps B2B organizations create their own shows. If you enjoyed what you learned, check out more episodes at motionagency.io/oncameraonbrand.